It carries kills millions.
It's estimated that 10,000 children die every single day of malaria.
We've thrown everything we've had at it. We've put our best scientists on it. And today there are more people dying of malaria than ever before.
This huge mortality is held in check by drugs, but we're losing them. If we don't get a new effective treatment, this is going to be a disaster.
Now, a wonderful new discovery might save humanity from the deadly bite of the mosquito. To study mosquitoes in the lab requires unusual dedication.
The trouble with keeping mosquitoes is that you have to feed them. The males are being fed on sugar water, which is in this bottle here in the middle of the cage, and you just see a male landing on it. But the females need something totally different. They only like blood, and preferably, in this case, human blood. I'm giving them the chance to feed on my arm twice a week. With mosquitoes, only the females take blood. They have mouth parts that are especially adapted to this kind of feeding behavior. As the mosquito lands on the skin, it inserts its mouth parts until they find a blood vessel. Subsequently, the wall of the blood vessel is being damaged and a pool of blood erupts. Now, the mosquito can prevent this blood from being clotted by injecting from its saliva an anticoagulant. So it is an excellent meal for them because basically it is concentrated protein, which allows them to develop eggs much more efficiently than, let's say, a butterfly. In some places of the world, mosquito densities are so high that if you go outside, you may die as a result of blood loss because of the many mosquitoes that come and take a blood meal.
A female mosquito's desire for blood is almost narcotic. She will feed on it until she can hardly fly. And afterwards, she must rest, exhausted, for a whole day. We humans pay a terrible price for this addiction. The symptoms of malaria are horrific. But this is a disease that long ago scientists said they would eradicate. Every attempt so far has failed, and instead things are getting worse. Behind this failure lies the story of a century-long battle against nature, a battle that is about to begin again. For thousands of years, malaria was rampant across the world, including most of Europe. But no one knew what caused it.
Up until the end of the 19th century, malaria was a really mysterious disease. Many people associated it with foul smells, with the bad airs of stagnant marshes. The word malaria comes from the Italian malaria, bad airs, and this became very much a preoccupation, that people would visit countries where they would see these horrible, foul-smelling marshes, and this gave them the idea that the malaria, the miasmas, the mists of these marshes actually caused the disease.
Then the mystery deepened. Scientists discovered that the blood of people with malaria was full of parasites. It was these that caused the disease. Everyone assumed the parasites must come from the marshes, but when they looked, the parasites were nowhere to be found.
Nobody could work out what the mechanism was to take the parasite into the human and how from one human to another the disease malaria, the malaria parasite, could be transmitted. This was the mystery that scientists were out to solve.
There were many theories. Some scientists said it was in the air, others in the drinking water, and some even wondered if it might be transmitted sexually. Then, one British doctor heard an even more outlandish theory. In the 1890s, Ronald Ross was in India treating soldiers with malaria when he came across a paper that suggested mosquitoes might spread the parasite. Malaria experts dismissed the idea as ludicrous. But Ross, a mere GP, set out to test the theory in what would become one of the most important experiments in the history of medicine. Nowadays, it can only be done in a high-security laboratory. He collected mosquitoes and fed them with the blood of people infected with malaria parasites. He wanted to see what happened to the parasite once it was inside the mosquito's body. It seemed impossible that a creature that lived in warm human blood could also survive inside a cold-blooded insect. Mosquitoes were considered so unimportant that hardly anyone had bothered to dissect them, and Ross knew next to nothing about insects. So his work would take him 2 years. He tried several species of mosquitoes, but the parasite simply died inside them. Then he tried one of the most common species of all, Anopheles. When Ross dissected this, he found something no one had ever seen before. In its gut were cyst-like shapes, eggs of malaria parasites. Ross had proved that the parasite could survive inside a mosquito, but how did the parasite then get back into humans? He returned to his dissection to see what happened next. He was amazed to find that the eggs had hatched, releasing thousands of rod-like parasites into the mosquito. He watched as the parasites migrated through the wall of the mosquito's gut into its body. They seemed to know exactly where they were going. They wriggled their way through the body up into the head, then one by one into the salivary glands. They were ready to be injected when the mosquito next fed.
It seems, looking back, so obvious. We're so familiar now with the transmission of many diseases, including malaria, by mosquito bites. But that was a really, really major scientific breakthrough, to know that the mosquito could inject the parasite into the human bloodstream through that biting process.
Ross had uncovered the key role of the mosquito in what is one of the most intricate life cycles in biology. If an Anopheles mosquito feeds on someone infected with malaria parasites, it takes them into its own body. When the infected mosquito feeds again, it injects the parasites into another human being. The parasite is a protozoa. Inside the human body, it mutates and destroys red blood cells. This causes the disease we know as malaria. The life cycle is an elaborate chain. Break one link and the parasite cannot spread.
When Ross made this discovery, for which he was eventually awarded the Nobel Prize, it provided the possibility of actually beginning to prevent this disease which had ravaged humanity for thousands of years. This was really one of the first examples of where an understanding of the life cycle, meaning how a disease is transmitted, could actually be applied to preventing that disease. Now that it was known that mosquitoes transmitted malaria, one could then attack the mosquitoes, and in fact Ross set out after that discovery to cure the world of malaria.
He sees this breakthrough as now the answer to the prevention of malaria. It's really very simple. If mosquitoes transmit malaria, what better than to kill the mosquitoes? That is his message to the world, to the malarial countries of the world: kill the mosquitoes.
An extraordinary battle against nature began. They started with the mosquitoes' breeding grounds. The larvae lived underwater, so marshes were drained. Slow-moving rivers were cleared, and oil was spread on the surface to suffocate them. Then they brought in the bombs.
Watch. Here it goes. This well-engineered blasting is a thunderclap of doom for millions upon millions of unborn mosquitoes.
There were some notable successes. In the 1930s, Mussolini was able to declare the area around Rome malaria-free for the first time in history. But keeping marshes drained was a constant battle. What was really needed was something that would get rid of mosquitoes once and for all. One group of people came up with the answer.
In every military campaign that our forces, meaning U.S. forces, have been involved in, when we were engaged in military campaigns where malaria was transmitted, we have always had more casualties to malaria than to hostile fire.
In any tropical theatre of war, you, as an army, always lose more soldiers to malaria than bullets. So it makes sense for an army to be interested in malaria and ways of protecting its soldiers.
The American military had long devoted huge resources to disease research. During the Second World War, they made malaria their top priority. They began to test thousands of compounds to see if they could come up with a uniquely powerful insecticide. They came up with a legend. It destroyed the nervous system of mosquitoes so completely that minute quantities were deadly. Sprayed onto surfaces, it was still killing mosquitoes a year later. And it was cheap. Even the poorest country in the world would be able to afford it. Its name was DDT.
This success was then taken as a justification to start a worldwide eradication program of malaria, whereby the entire world actually would be sprayed with an insecticide to get rid of the mosquitoes and subsequently get rid of the malaria.
In the optimism of the post-war years, the new World Health Organization came up with a bold plan. to eradicate malaria completely. Most of the staff and money of WHO were devoted to the task, and they said malaria would be gone by the 1990s. DDT was to consign it to the history books. The strategy was simple: to break the life cycle of the disease on a global scale by wiping out mosquitoes. It was a huge undertaking. No corner of the world was ignored. No home too humble to receive attention.
They were able to completely remove the disease from Europe, North America and Russia. The incidence of the disease fell dramatically in many parts of the tropics as well.
Success spurred them on. It was the mosquito's darkest hour. No hiding place was secure.
There were also breeding places in potholes high up in the mountains. Local mountaineers were enlisted to deal with them.
This was a fantastic development, and it gave them hope that they could actually eradicate the disease completely from the world.
It was dramatically reduced in South America. It was dramatically reduced in India and Sri Lanka, where there had been in India 80 million cases prior to eradication, and they were able to reduce it down to 50,000 cases.
Everything seemed to be going to plan.
Our children will be the first generation freed from the enslaving fever.
Malaria was being described as a disease of the past. But then the mosquito fought back.
Mosquitoes are remarkable, resilient insects. One female can produce up to 1,000 offspring in a lifetime. And in a very few weeks, you can have millions of offspring from that one individual mosquito female. If one of these offspring happens to be resistant against an insecticide, you can imagine that being so highly fertile, within a very short period you can get the development of totally resistant insect populations. From the beginning, people should have realized that it would never have been feasible to spray so many areas simultaneously and avoid the development of insecticide resistance.
DDT began to fail, and as the mosquito returned, so did malaria.
One went from a situation where there were a handful of cases in Sri Lanka and thousands of cases in India to a situation where they went to millions of cases.
As malaria rebounded, scientists came up with new insecticides, but resistance built up to them too. And they were all hundreds of times more expensive than DDT, much too expensive for a global eradication campaign. In 1969, utterly demoralized, the World Health Organization finally admitted it could never win the battle against the mosquito. They would have to think of another way to beat malaria. The mosquito had defeated them. There is one corner of the world where the battle against the mosquito continues to this day, and here it's a huge success. If you want to see what it takes to fight mosquitoes in a tropical climate, you have to come to Florida.
Well, in the past, in one mosquito trap on Sanibel, one night they trapped 365,000 mosquitoes. If you go out now in that same place and put that same trap out, you might trap 15 mosquitoes.
Florida had a serious malaria problem until the 1940s. Spraying with DDT stamped it out. But when DDT failed, the Americans could afford to keep fighting. They simply bought the new, more expensive insecticides and sprayed them 24 hours a day, everywhere. And when each insecticide failed, the insect killers of Florida bought the next chemical, no matter the cost. It's been a constant battle to outwit the mosquito's ability to adapt. It requires some serious hardware.
Mosquito 6-2, Mike, Roger, report commencing your spray area.
We eradicated malaria here in the 40s, and health concerns for our citizens here is the number one reason that mosquito control exists. We don't want malaria to infest our county. We have a very comprehensive program here at Lee County Mosquito Control. We send out field inspectors in small helicopters to areas that are known to breed mosquitoes. And when they find small concentrations of mosquito larvae, we'll take care of them right there on the spot. When we find large areas that are breeding, we'll send out our Hueys. Those are Vietnam-era helicopters. They're pretty much battle tanks, too.
If I have Roger come in from the shoreline, they'd have problems all along this whole area.
It's only after the mosquito population hatches out and the adults fly that we have to use the DC-3s. When we end up using the DC-3s, we're losing the war against the mosquito larvae. But we still have the means to kill them once they get to that flying stage.